The moment you stopped needing her, that was the moment she started needing you. Not when you were your most devoted. Not when you were your most present, your most attentive, your most willing to restructure your life around her comfort. The moment the caring genuinely died. The moment the need for her response, her warmth, her validation, quietly, completely, went silent inside you. That was the moment something shifted in her that she couldn't name and couldn't control. Most men never experience this. Not because they lack the capacity, but because they never stop caring long enough to discover what the stopping produces. They stay in the cycle, trying harder, waiting longer, giving more, right up until the ending. And so they carry a wound they cannot diagnose, because they never witnessed the one piece of evidence that would have reframed everything, what she becomes the moment his need for her disappears. Picture this. A man who spent months absorbing her distance, chasing her warmth, adjusting himself to manage her moods, one day simply stops. Not with a speech, not with an ultimatum. He stops internally. He wakes up and his first thought is not about her. His phone is face down and he leaves it that way through the morning. He makes plans without checking her availability. He is, for the first time in a long time, entirely occupied with himself. She notices within 48 hours. Not because he did anything visible, because the pressure she had grown so accustomed to feeling from his direction, the low-frequency pull of someone who needed her, suddenly vanished. And the absence of that pressure is somehow louder than anything he ever said. What a woman does with that silence is the most psychologically revealing thing about her. This video is not about revenge. It is about what genuinely happens inside her psychology, inside the dynamic, when a man truly lets go. You already know what the cycle feels like. You've lived the inside of it. You cared. Deeply, genuinely, without performance. You showed up when she was distant, reached out when she went quiet, softened yourself when she needed space, and stretched yourself when she needed presence. You tracked her moods with the precision of a man who had made her emotional state his primary responsibility. And you called all of that love because it felt like love, the effort, the vigilance, the refusal to give up. What it actually was, in large part, was anxiety wearing love's clothing. The pattern has a specific emotional texture every man in it recognizes but rarely admits. You measured the quality of your day by her response rate. A warm message in the morning could straighten your entire posture. A cold reply, or no reply, could hollow out an afternoon you had nothing else wrong with. Your internal weather was entirely dependent on her external temperature. And she felt that. Not in the way you intended it to be felt, as devotion, as care. She felt it as pressure. The particular, exhausting pressure of being someone else's emotional thermostat. A man sends a message at 9 a.m., checks his phone at 9:47, again at 10:12. The message sits there, read, unacknowledged. He composes a follow-up, deletes it, writes it again, sends something softer. She responds at 2 p.m. with something that requires nothing from her. He is relieved. He tells himself the morning's anxiety was unreasonable. He doesn't notice that relieved is now his version of happy. When relief becomes the ceiling of your emotional experience in a relationship, you are not in love. You are in hostage. The brutal contrast. The more he gave, the less it cost her to receive it. The more available he made himself, the less valuable his availability became. He was spending real emotional currency into a system that had quietly stopped recognizing its value. And the reason the cycle is so difficult to break is not weakness. It is the fundamental misunderstanding of what actually governs the dynamic. That misunderstanding is about to be named precisely. The mechanism operating underneath this entire dynamic is one of the oldest in human psychology, and it has nothing to do with games or manipulation. Call it confirmation dependency. When a man's sense of value inside a relationship becomes contingent on her ongoing confirmation, her responses, her warmth, her visible investment, he has effectively handed her the remote control to his internal state. She doesn't even have to operate it deliberately. The mere fact that she holds it changes the entire power structure of the relationship. She feels the weight of that remote control. Not as power she sought, most women are not consciously engineering this, but as something that makes him feel less substantial. A man whose stability requires her input is a man who cannot be fully trusted to hold his own ground. And at a neurological level below conscious thought, this registers as a specific kind of unsafety, not physical danger, but the particular unease of being someone's primary source of emotional regulation. Here is the contrasting truth. A man who has stopped needing her confirmation has, in a single interior shift, removed that weight from her. And the removal of weight she didn't ask to carry feels, paradoxically, like loss, like something that had been pressing against her, constant and familiar, has suddenly gone still. The human nervous system does not respond neutrally to the removal of a constant pressure. It notices. It searches for the source of what disappeared. Picture the dynamic mid-cycle. He is attentive, warm, leaning slightly in her direction whenever she speaks. She leans back, not dramatically, almost imperceptibly. He leans further in to compensate. She retreats a fraction more. The geometry of the interaction is entirely determined by his need, which she reads not as love but as imbalance. An imbalance she tolerates but cannot respect. Now picture the same dynamic after the internal shift. He is present when present, quiet when quiet. His attention is no longer structurally organized around her response. He does not lean in when she leans back. He simply remains where he is, level, occupied, complete. The man who stopped needing her is the first version of him she genuinely cannot read. And what a woman cannot read, she cannot stop thinking about. That is the mechanism. Not cruelty. Not withdrawal as performance. The simple, structural reality that self-possession changes what a man transmits. And what he transmits is the only thing she's actually responding to. What this produces in lived reality is almost uncomfortable to witness. The changes are quiet at first, almost invisible. That is what makes them so powerful. He stops texting first. Not as a rule he imposed on himself, as a natural result of being genuinely occupied with his own life. She notices the absence of his initiation before she consciously registers that she's noticed. She picks up her phone on Tuesday afternoon and realizes, with a slight discomfort she doesn't examine immediately, that she hasn't heard from him. She sends something brief, testing, though she wouldn't call it that. He responds the next morning. The response is warm but contained. He doesn't expand it into a conversation. He doesn't use it as an opening to demonstrate how much he's thought about her. He responds, then returns to whatever he was doing. She sends another message that same evening. This one is longer. Something has shifted in the architecture of the dynamic, and she is moving toward him before she understands why. It shows up in shared spaces differently. They're in the same room. Previously, his attention was so completely oriented toward her that she could feel it like a hand on her shoulder. Constant, slightly oppressive. Now he's reading, or working, or simply somewhere inside himself that she doesn't have immediate access to. She looks at him twice in 20 minutes. He doesn't notice or doesn't respond to being noticed. She says something. He responds with genuine attention, but then returns to himself. She finds herself saying more than she intended just to hold his focus. She is pursuing the attention of a man who is no longer organizing himself around her. And she is doing it without realizing that is what she's doing. It shows up in conflict recovery with disturbing clarity. She tests, as people do when a dynamic shifts, with a cold remark, an edge in her tone, the kind of thing that previously would have produced an immediate softening from him. He receives it. He doesn't fight it. He doesn't apologize around it. He simply doesn't change his position. The silence that follows is not hostile. It is settled. That settledness is the most disorienting thing she has encountered in the dynamic in months. The reframe that changes everything. He didn't become more attractive by doing more. He became more attractive by requiring less validation, less management, less emotional maintenance from her. What looks like absence is actually the first authentic presence he's had in the relationship. What lives underneath that shift, the philosophical truth behind all of it, is darker and more important than anything in this section. Here is what is actually happening beneath the surface of this entire dynamic, and it cuts in both directions. When a man truly stops caring, not as strategy, not as temporary withdrawal, but as a genuine internal shift, he is not becoming less. He is becoming, for the first time, real. The version of him that needed her approval was not the full man. It was a man reduced by need, distorted by anxiety, organized around a source of validation that was never supposed to carry that much weight. When that need dies, what remains is more honest. And she responds to what is honest, even when honest is harder to manage than devoted. Here is the psychological truth that most men are never given directly. A woman's attraction to a man has never been a response to his love for her. It has always been a response to his relationship with himself. His love for her is secondary information. His self-possession, or its absence, is the primary signal her nervous system is reading constantly, beneath every word, beneath every gesture, beneath every interaction they have. When his self-possession is absent, when his internal state is entirely governed by her response, she experiences him as fundamentally untrustworthy with power. Not consciously, neurologically. A man who cannot self-regulate does not feel safe to lean into. He feels like a weight she will eventually have to carry. When his self-possession returns, when he stops needing her to feel whole, he becomes suddenly someone she could actually lean into. And the desire to lean into someone is the closest thing to attraction that language can describe. Here is the line that will divide the comments. A woman does not fall back into interest because a man stopped caring. She falls back into interest because she confused his caring for his identity, and the moment the caring stopped, she discovered there was actually a man underneath it. Picture a woman lying awake at 1 a.m. She's not sure what she's thinking about. She picks up her phone. She goes to his name. She doesn't text. She puts the phone down. She picks it up again 5 minutes later. She tells herself she's just checking if he's active. She is not just checking if he's active. This is what genuine indifference produces in a woman who took presence for granted. Not relief, not satisfaction, hunger. The hunger is real. But what a man does with the knowledge of that hunger, whether he uses it wisely or wastes it, that determines everything about what follows. Because there is a version of this story where the man who finally stopped caring uses that shift to rebuild something real. And there is a version where he doesn't. The shift in the dynamic is a byproduct. The real shift, the one that matters, is interior. When a man stops caring in the way this video describes, he is not executing a move. He is recovering a self. The self that existed before he made her the organizing principle of his emotional life. The self that had direction, standards, and a sense of worth that did not require external confirmation to remain intact. That recovery is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in the specific choices a man starts making when her approval is no longer the variable his confidence runs on. He says what he actually thinks. He declines what he actually doesn't want. He occupies his time with what actually matters to him. He is, for the first time in a long while, entirely himself, not a performance of devotion, not a negotiation with her emotional state, but simply a man living his own life with his own weight. A man who has recovered himself is not harder to love. He is, for the first time, actually lovable because there is a real person there to love. The contrast between before and after is visible in his body before it's visible in his behavior. He carries himself differently, not with performance, with settledness. The particular stillness of a man who is not waiting for anything. She feels that settledness before she understands it, and it produces in her something that all the effort and devotion and availability never managed to produce. Genuine curiosity about who he actually is. If this is reaching something real, if you can feel the distance between the man you've been in relationships and the man being described here, stay with that distance. Don't rush past it. What follows is the part that actually costs something to hear. The shift is available to every man who is willing to make it. But making it requires confronting a warning that most men would rather avoid. The warning is this: stopping caring is not the same as becoming free. A man who stops caring as a reaction, who withdraws to produce a response, who goes quiet to force her hand, who uses emotional distance as a weapon, is not recovering himself. He is running a more sophisticated version of the same dependency. He is still organized around her, still measuring, still needing an outcome from her direction. The object of the need changed. The need did not. Real freedom is when her response genuinely stops being the variable. When he is equally himself whether she reaches back or stays silent. When the outcome of the dynamic does not alter his internal state, because his internal state is no longer housed in the dynamic. That is the line most men cannot cross. Because crossing it requires accepting a truth that is genuinely uncomfortable. If she comes back when you stop needing her, you have to be willing to want her from that place. Not from the old place of need, dressed in new indifference. The man who stops caring and then immediately reinstalls his dependency the moment she shows renewed interest has wasted the shift. He has simply cycled back to the beginning with more resentment and less dignity. Picture a man who finally achieved the internal stillness, the real kind, not the performed kind, and she reached back. Something in him surged. And without noticing, he leaned forward again. Responded too quickly. Made himself too available. Within 3 weeks, the dynamic had reestablished itself exactly as it was before. He did not lose her twice. He lost himself again, and she responded to that loss the same way she always had. The lesson is not to stop caring. The lesson is to stop needing. Those are not the same action, and the difference between them determines whether the shift produces something sustainable or just another cycle. What becomes possible when a man finally makes the real shift? Not the reactive one, not the performative one, the genuine one, is the subject of the final section. This is the full picture assembled. The reason she moves toward you when you stop needing her is not because indifference is attractive. It is because your indifference, when it is genuine, is the first evidence she has had that there is a real man underneath the devotion. A man with his own gravity. A man whose worth is not a variable she controls. A man who, for the first time, she could actually lose. And the possibility of loss is the only thing that has ever produced genuine desire in any human being toward any other. She was never going to want what she fully owned. Nobody does. This is not a comfortable truth. It asks something of the men who hear it, not strategy, not game playing, but the much harder work of building an interior life stable enough that it doesn't require her validation to function. The kind of stability that comes from purpose, from self-respect, from the quiet daily decision to be someone who exists independently of any relationship's outcome. That work is not glamorous. It is not the kind of thing that produces visible results quickly, but it is the only foundation on which anything real can be built. Every relationship entered from that foundation is different, because the man entering it is different. His love comes from surplus, not from fear. His presence carries weight because his absence is genuinely possible. And she feels all of it before a single word is spoken. If this channel has been giving you clarity that you haven't found in the noise, the kind that reaches beneath the surface and names something real, subscribe. Because this is what this channel exists to do, and there is more precision coming. If there is a man in your life who is living inside the cycle described in this video, giving everything, measuring her responses, organizing his worth around her warmth, share this with him. Not as advice. As a mirror he may not have access to otherwise. Leave a comment with this: what was the moment you realized you had stopped being yourself inside a relationship, and what did that cost you? Because that moment is where everything that matters actually begins. The most powerful thing you ever did for her was the day you finally needed nothing from her, and meant it.